In this video, I'm going to show you how I designed the layout of a piano keyboard. Now, since I don't know what you already know or don't know, I'm going to start off as if you don't possess any knowledge at all about piano keyboards or about music theory in general. So please forgive me if some of this is just a review. Hopefully, I'll soon catch up to the parts that might be new to you. A piano keyboard is made up of black and white keys. You can observe that the white keys occur regularly over the length of the keyboard, while the black keys occur in an irregular but repeating pattern. You may be familiar with the do-re-mi or solfege scale. Do-re-mi-fa-sol-la-ti-do. Those 8 notes form what is called an octave, from a Latin word meaning, you guessed it, 8 notes. More specifically, an octave refers to the interval from the first do to the last do, which is the 8th note in the sequence. Note that the two do's sound similar, except that they're in different registers musically. In fact, all the do's sound similar, as do all the re's, all the mi's, etc. But for now, let's just look at one octave. The names of the notes in the octave are taken from the alphabet, starting with the letter C and continuing with D, E, F, and G, then going back to the beginning of the alphabet with the letters A and B, and ending up with C again. Technically, this is known as the diatonic C major scale. Even though an octave is 8 notes long, if you look at it closely, you'll realize that it's really a repeating pattern of 7 notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and that the 8th note, C, is actually the start of the next octave, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and so on, up and down the whole keyboard. So the octave is actually a repeating pattern of 7 white keys. So far, so good. But what makes it interesting are the black keys. You can see that within each octave of white keys, there are 5 black keys, but their pattern is irregular. We have a group of 2 followed by a group of 3. This is also known as a pentatonic scale. But this irregular pattern is repeated over the whole keyboard, just as it is with the white keys. So, in all, an octave comprises 7 white keys plus 5 black keys for a total of 12 notes, or semitones as they're called. If we play all 12 notes in succession, we get what is called a chromatic scale, which, again, is repeated across the entire keyboard. Now, our goal is to put a little push-button switch underneath each of the 12 keys, which will trigger the electronics of the keyboard or synthesizer we're playing or building to produce the appropriate sound for each key that is pressed. But the challenge is that we would like these buttons to be evenly spaced under the keys, so they form a regular repeating pattern underneath the keyboard. So how do we accomplish that with 7 regularly spaced white keys and 5 irregularly spaced black keys? First, note that the real estate we have to work with is all made up of only the 7 white keys. The 5 black keys do not take up any additional space, but rather they fit in between the white keys and actually cut into the white keys, turning them into similar but irregular shapes. So how do we handle all of this? Let's open Tinkercad and start by creating a white key. Now I'm going to choose some dimensions that give us numbers that are easier to work with, so this design is not going to be exactly to scale. I'm going to create a white key by starting off with a basic cube shape, making it 140 units long by 24 units wide and 15 units high. And we'll color it white. Now, since we want to have a little space between the white keys, I'm going to shave off 1 unit from the right side of the white key to make it 23 units wide. Now we want 7 of these white keys, so I'm going to duplicate it, but 24 units to the right to retain our little gap. And we'll do that 5 more times to make 7 white keys in all. Now remember that we want to have one push-button switch for each semitone across the space of these 7 white keys. So if we find the total width of the 7 white keys, including the 6 gaps between them, plus the gap that would follow the 7th key before where the next octave would begin, we get 24 times 7, which is 168 units. And dividing that 168 units by 12, the number of semitones, we get 14 units, which is the width that each semitone needs to be for 12 of them to fit perfectly under the 7 white keys. Do you follow me? In case you're wondering how I came to choose 24 for the width of the white keys, here's the math, but don't worry, it's not that scary. We have 12 semitones that we want to fit in the space of 7 white keys. Now the lowest common denominator of the numbers 12 and 7 turns out to be 12 times 7, or 84. You can see that 84 divided by 12 is 7, and conversely, 84 divided by 7 is 12. That means that I can use 7 white keys that are each 12 units wide to fill a space that is 84 units wide. And conversely, I can use 12 semitones that are each 7 units wide to also fill that same space of 84 units. Now, I decided to double all the dimensions because that gets us closer to the dimensions in millimeters of actual full-sized piano keys, but still gives us nice round numbers to work with. So I use 2 times 7, or 14, for the width of a semitone, and 2 times 12, or 24, for the width of a white key. And that made the entire width 84 times 2, or 168, which is also 7 times 24. So now let's design the concept of a semitone. We'll start again with a basic cube shape. We know that it must be 14 units wide, and let's make it 100 units long, and align it to the back of the white keys. We'll make it as high as the white keys, so 15 units high, but we'll add 1 unit above it and below it, so it'll be 17 units high. Now let's lower it by 1 unit, so it'll be visible underneath the white keys. And we'll just color it gray for now. Now we're going to align it to the left edge of the first white key. And now we'll duplicate it 14 units to the right, and duplicate it 10 more times to make 12 semitones in all. See how they all fit perfectly across the 7 white keys? And in case you're wondering, this 1 unit overhang on the right edge is the gap that needs to be there if there's going to be another octave to the right of this one. Now let's pretend that underneath each semitone we're going to have a little round felt pad that will contact the push-button switch underneath it. Let's create that. We'll start with a cylinder. Make it 10 units in diameter and 1 unit thick. And we'll lower it by 2 units so that we can see it underneath the semitones. And we'll position it right about here along the keys. And then we'll align it to the center of the width of the first semitone. Now we'll duplicate it 14 units to the right because these pads will need to be the same distance apart as the semitones are. And then we'll duplicate it 10 more times to make 12 pads in all. Now let's go back up to the top. The semitone shapes I've made are to represent the positions of the black keys, which are also known as sharps or flats. But you may say, I've made 12 semitones even though we only have 5 black keys. So let's do some pruning. First, let's add the letter note names to make it easier to follow this part. The first semitone is over the white key for the note C. So since we won't need to place a black key there, let's delete that semitone. Now the next semitone is between the C and D white keys. And that is where we'd like to place our first black key, which is called C sharp. Sharp means it's one semitone higher than the note below it. Note that it can also be called D flat, because a flat is one semitone lower than the note above it. So we'll want to keep that semitone. The next semitone is over the D white key. So as before with the one over the C white key, we won't be placing a black key there either. So we'll delete it. The next semitone is between the D and E white keys, and we'll be putting our second black key there for D sharp or E flat. So we'll keep that semitone. The next semitone is over the white E key, so we won't put a black key there. So let's delete that one. Now, if you are starting to get accustomed to the pattern so far, here's where we're about to break it. Since there is no black E sharp key above the white E key, then we'll just treat the next semitone as being over the white F key, and so we'll delete that semitone as well. Now the next semitone is for the black key between the F and G white keys for F sharp or G flat, so we'll keep that one. The next semitone is over the G white key, so we don't want a black key there, and we'll delete it. This is similar to the pattern we had in the beginning with the C, D, and E keys. Because the next semitone is between the G and A white keys for the G sharp or A flat black key, we'll keep that one. After that comes the semitone over the A white key, so we don't need a black key there, so we'll delete that semitone. Then the next one is the semitone between the A and B white keys, which will be the black key for A sharp or B flat, so we'll keep that one. And the last semitone is over the white key for B, so we don't need a black key there, so we delete that one. There, that leaves us with only the semitones representing the 5 black sharps and flats. Now I'm going to change all 5 of these from solid shapes into holes, which we'll use to cut into the shapes of the white keys. So here goes. Now what you see is the 7 white keys with spaces cut out of them where we'll be placing the 5 black keys. So let's create a black key. We'll start once more with a basic cube shape, and we'll make its length 1 unit less than the length of the semitone space, which is 100 units long, so we'll make it 99 units long. Remember that a semitone is 14 units wide, and let's trim it by 1 unit from the left side and from the right side to give it a little room, making it 12 units wide. And we'll make it a little taller than the white keys, so let's make it 24 units high. And of course, let's make it black. Now let's align it with the back of the white keys. Now we'll align it to the left side of the first white key, and we'll move it over 1 unit to the right to account for the 1 unit that we trimmed from its left side and to center it within the semitone space. Now we'll duplicate it 14 units to the right, and then again 10 more times to make 12 of them. Note that we're only doing this to get the positioning right, just like we did before with the semitones. We'll delete the ones that don't exist, and voila! What we're left with are the 5 actual black keys in the octave. Let's go underneath again and raise the round felt pads up by 1 unit. So now they're directly underneath the keys. And now let's get a look at the whole keyboard from the top. And there you have it. 1 octave of 12 semitones of black and white keys. And here's the really interesting part. If we go underneath again, observe that now there is 1 round felt pad for a push-button switch exactly underneath each of the 12 black and white keys, which was our goal for this project. So we've accomplished it. Now remember when we first created the 7 white keys, the width of that octave was 7 times 24, or 168 units. So let's replicate the whole thing 168 units to the right. And again 3 more times. And now we have an entire 5-octave keyboard. So there it is. That forms the basis of how I designed my own piano keyboard for an electronic synthesizer from scratch. But remember that the white key width I used of 24 millimeters was just for convenience. If you want to do this yourself, you'll have to use the actual width of a real piano's white key, which will be a little smaller, plus the gap to the right of it. For example, my grand piano's white keys are an average of 22.04 millimeters wide. You'll also have to decide exactly how long and how tall you want to make them, and use similar measurements for the black keys. But the principle will be the same, just not with such nice round numbers. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and for sticking it out to the end.